Part 30. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 291. Put on your hat. Wear a mask. Get in line, come and watch me wash my hands. You. Pull up the mask. Cover the bridge of your nose. What about you? Gretel kept giving orders. Hey, it's not easy to take care of 24 little ones at once. Press the gourd and let the ladle float. He has not yet reached the 7-step hand-washing method. Just wearing a hat and a mask requires him to correct it 7 or 8 times. No way. Greet thought silently in his heart, these are ordinary people, they cannot be treated as well-trained medical students. They don't have the concept of aseptic operation, so they have to teach them step by step from scratch. Be patient, be patient. When ordinary people wear masks and squeeze into the subway, 2 or 3 out of 10 people will pull down the masks. If you look closely, there will be 3 or 4 masks that are not airtight enough. Even when an epidemic breaks out, medical staff need emergency training when putting on and taking off protective clothing. It took a lot of effort to teach them the 7-step hand-washing technique, and they passed the assessment one by one. After teaching them how to put on and take off protective clothing, a whole morning passed. And that afternoon, when everyone put on protective clothing and prepared to officially enter the P4 laboratory, they encountered another obstacle. Meow. The black cat next to Lynn walked elegantly to the door and sat down quietly. Turning his head, his golden eyes looked at Gretel without blinking, and his snow-white beard moved. The meaning is very clear. I want to go in too. Mr. Trochka, you can't go in. Greet raised his hand to signal everyone to stop, bent down, and discussed with the black cat. Fortunately, this black cat is intelligent, can speak human language, and can negotiate, so there is no need for him to scratch cats everywhere. Meow. The black cat turned to look at the airtight door, then turned to look at Gretel, its tail snapping and hitting the floor regularly. After a stalemate for a while, seeing that Gretel had no intention of compromising, a ball of black light suddenly erupted, and his whole body suddenly swelled. Oops! The students exclaimed. Greet also subconsciously took a step back and saw Mr. Trochka transform from a black cat with white gloves that was 20 to 30 centimeters tall and weighed only a few kilograms, into a black panther in an instant. He pressed forward with great momentum, his chest was snoring, and a deep roar kept rolling. Gretel! You dare to bite me? You dare to bite me? And your roar is totally wrong. Cheetahs, leopards, and snow leopards don't roar like this. I've heard the sounds of leopards, and they are very delicate. Troka, Lin yelled from behind. The black panther raised his head and glanced at his master. His steps suddenly stopped and his body shrank completely. In an instant, what appeared in everyone's eyes had turned into a delicate little kitten. Wow! Behind Gretel, the boys and girls couldn't help but make cute sounds. The black cat's body is only as big as a palm and can be lifted up with one hand. Its watery eyes take up almost half of its face. Her 4 short legs were spread out, and she walked a little wobbly, making her look even more pitiful and cute. Seeing the students crowded around and looking over, it rolled on the floor, revealing its white belly and 4 pink paw pads. Behind Greet, the sounds of breathing suddenly began one after another, and some students tentatively wanted to ask for mercy. Gentlemen! Gretel, don't act cute, I won't let you in even if you act cute. You are not disinfected. You are not wearing protective clothing. If you are not allowed in, you are not allowed in. Get out. Mr. Lin. Next to the black cat, a bone hand suddenly descended and scratched at the head. The black cat jumped up, climbed onto the high platform, got under the table, jumped into the faucet, and turned into a bolt of lightning at the entrance of the laboratory. However, the bone hand was obviously very experienced and kept chasing after him. After a few rounds, he actually pinched the back of the black cat's neck and lifted it into the air. Behind the bone hand, pieces of bones clicked and flew over on their own, and it didn't take long to form a golden skeleton. He walked out slowly, rounded his arms, and threw the black cat violently. Meow ouch 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 dash. The black cat's shrill cry gradually faded away. Greet breathed a sigh of relief and quickly ordered. Moss, close the door. The main door of the laboratory closed quietly. Lin An came over sheepishly. I'm sorry, cats are always like this. Although Troca is a demon pet, when it takes the form of a cat, it takes on the nature of a cat. By the way, can this skeleton come in? Can we come in? Skeletons are easier to wash. Alas, if the skeleton can be controlled remotely to perform precise operations, there is really no need for the magician to enter and leave the P4 laboratory in person, put on protective clothing, take off protective clothing, take a shower with potions, change clothes, and rinse. If you put it this way, necromancers and dangerous biological experiments are actually a perfect match. Unfortunately, controlling skeletons is a long shot after all. Gretel's current work still relies on magicians and magic apprentices to do it themselves. For several days, Greet walked around the laboratory, correcting various wrongdoings of the apprentices. The beef paste needs to be cooked through. Don't hold the petri dish with your hands. Put it back into the dirty pile and prepare to re-sterilize it. The bacteria on your hands will contaminate the petri dish, and the results will be inaccurate. Use a dropper to absorb the culture solution. Who told you to pour it directly into the petri dish? Change the culture solution and try again. You still put the culture solution bottle next to the mouth of the petri dish. Are you afraid that there are not enough bacteria? Hands. Hands. Don't touch the operating table with your hands. Have you forgotten the sterile operation? Open the lid of the petri dish and use a microscope to look at it. Who taught you? All the bacteria fell into it. If there are too many bacteria, the result will be useless. It will also contaminate the lens. I'm just a clinician, not a biology major. I'm not even in the lab. Why do I have to endure so many things that I shouldn't have to endure? I haven't done bacterial culture experiments many times in my previous life. Greet looked at the sky in pain. However, lament is lament, teaching still needs to be taught. Only when they are taught can they be used as tools, right? To be on the safe side, Greet did not choose those deadly infectious germs. He didn't even choose Staphylococcus aureus, just in case some student got careless and cut himself with a knife and got infected. Instead, he carefully removed a small bottle of E. coli from his own freezer, cultured, multiplied, and distributed it to the students. Bring it on. Let's do bacterial culture, propagation, and staining experiments. This bacterium is not very lethal. Even if the protection is not in place, the worst thing is that students should wash their hands before going out and again before eating. The students learned so much that they were overwhelmed. After training in bacterial culture, bacterial staining, and microscopy, Greet began to train them non-stop to make culture media. Trim off the fat from the beef. It must be trimmed. Don't leave any. Wash the sea pebbles. Don't be reluctant to use water. Which temple do you belong to? You should wash them more carefully. The oyster shells are all stuck to them. Add sulfuric acid. Pour it down slowly, and be careful with your hands. Remember to test the pH, the test strips and comparison chart are given to you. A group of mage apprentices and priest apprentices rolled up their sleeves, removing the fat from the beef, boiling the beef, and rinsing the sea stone flowers. Every day, I smell of salt, blood, and strange fragrance, and I work to the point of exhaustion. I asked, are we working in a restaurant? Maybe. I've never done anything in the mage tower. I didn't even have it in the temple. We, the apprentices, are the ones who help us add food to our temple, kill chickens and ducks, but it's a pity that the fat needs to be trimmed off of good beef. Several boys from the God of War temple replied in a low voice. Such beautiful snowflake beef can only be eaten by high-ranking knights and bishops in their temple. If you put it in the mage tower, not only can you not eat it, but you also have to remove the fat first. The 4 apprentices of the Order of the God of Nature lowered their heads and said nothing. They do a lot of work, turning the soil, fertilizing, pulling weeds, taking care of poultry and livestock, cleaning up manure. There is no shortage of farm work. Are temple priests more noble than others? Non-existent. After struggling like this for half a month, the students' operations finally changed from jerky to proficient. Less and less things were wasted, and Gretel's scoldings became less and less. Finally, Gretel announced the start of the first phase of the exam. Let's test our learning results. Starting from making the culture medium, everyone operates the entire process independently to complete the culture, isolation, and microscopic examination of fecal E. coli. The 24 students were up and down, whining. It looked like he had skipped class for half a month, and the teacher suddenly informed the students that they were going to take an exam. Gretel looked at the bitter faces with a smile and clapped his hands. If you make it, there will be rewards. What if it can't be done? A weak voice came from the back of the crowd. Gretel smiled. If you can't do it, you can make up the exam. If you fail the make-up exam 3 times in a row, I can only ask you to go back to where you came from. This threat not only made everyone nervous, but also Master Lin An followed Alexander. He made a set of utensils by himself, washed the seaweed, boiled the beef, added acid and alkali, filtered and removed the residue, and did everything meticulously step by step. Next to him, the golden skeleton also made a set of things, and followed the exact same operation, seeming to be trying to create a double insurance. However, even so, Master Lin An still failed to finish first. While he was still preparing the dye to dye the bacteria, the group of students already raised a hand. Mage Nordmark, I'm ready here. Gretel walked over quickly. Looking under a microscope, the appearance of E. coli is clearly visible under the microscope, with its short, thick shape and flagella. He smiled with satisfaction and wanted to pat the student on the shoulder. He held back his hand halfway and just patted him with the hand of the mage. Yes, yes, you did the right thing. What's your name? Which organization are you from? My name is Leon Carlos, from Black Crow Swamp, sir. The apprentice bowed and saluted with a clear voice. Through the protective clothing and mask, Greet couldn't see his expression, but he could hear the joy in his voice, almost a little excited. Greet's mood also became cheerful. Very good. The 3rd update tonight, no, starting tomorrow, you can help me and we can start a new project. I found out how to make agar, but it's hard to find out how to make beef extract. I read a lot of papers, and all I found were to add ginger powder, allspice powder, nutmeg powder, white pepper, to make beef extract for culture media. How? Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 292. Greet still has an impression of Leon Carlos as an apprentice. This young man has black hair and black eyes, has a quiet personality, but is diligent in his hands and feet. Others have stopped to rest, and he will help others clean test tubes, clean up the operating table, and collect samples. Even those priests from the deistic church were taking care of the experimental animals. When Leon saw it, he would help them. This time he was the first to produce results. Gretel saw this and inevitably wanted to teach him more skills. It just so happened that after he got the mage tower, he had a lot of projects in his hands, and he just wished he didn't have a coolie to help him. Of course, a student with good qualifications and hard work should try his best to take them into his hands. Well, which project should I throw at him? Early the next morning, on the 8th floor of the Mage Tower, in Gretel's study, 3 boys and girls lined up. In addition to Leon Carlos, the girl from the Order of the God of Nature who came with a bunch of wild boars and a young man from the School of Change were the top 3 in this assessment. Greet, who had many projects at hand and was only worried that no one was doing them and had no ideas, naturally began to wholesale projects for these coolies. You are the first in this assessment, so I ask you first. Greet looked at Leon Carlos seriously. I have 3 projects on hand, all of which should be suitable for your ability and direction. One has a shorter cycle and makes money faster, one has a shorter cycle and is more profitable, but is more varied, and the other has a fairly long cycle. It's almost impossible to make any money, but it's the most consistent with the direction of the necromancy school. Which one do you choose? When Greed talked about the second topic, the boy from the School of Change moved slightly. However, he was ranked 3rd in the assessment, and only the first 2 people had finished choosing before it would be his turn to choose. The young man clenched his fist slightly and lowered his head, while Leon Carlos thought for a moment and then raised his head with firm eyes. I choose the 3rd one. Are you sure? Gretel looked at him carefully. Leon stood upright in front of him. The pure black mage robe uniformed by Black Crow Swamp had been washed white in some places, and the cuffs and hem were frayed to the point of fraying in many places. In such a worrying economic situation, should we choose long-term, unprofitable topics? Are you sure he can persevere? Even if he persists, is this really good for him? You know, a magician's advancement must also be supported by financial strength. I'm sure. Thanks, sir. Gretel nodded and asked him to step aside. He sent the project to study biogas digestives to the girls from the Natural God Church. When it was the turn of the School of Change, only the last one was left. Well, go and do some research on why winemaking fails and why stored wine turns sour. Mr. Nordmark, Leon Carlos suddenly interrupted. Gretel turned to look at him. What? You regretted it? I'm sorry, Mr. Nordmark. The black-haired and black-eyed boy took 2 steps forward, bowed his head, and bent as deeply as a green bamboo. When he raised his head again, his eyes were unusually bright, and 2 red masses burned on his cheekbones, as if something was igniting from the inside out. I don't mean to disobey you. But, my father once opened a winery, and I used to help there when I was a child. Then one year, several batches of wine were brewed in succession, and the winery could not turn around, and had no choice but to sell it to others. My father couldn't afford it. He buried his head deeply, his shoulders shook, and his hands clenched into fists. After a moment, he raised his head for the 3rd time, his voice already trembling slightly. I don't hold a grudge, nor do I want to take revenge on the person who took away the wine shop. I just want to know. Sir, I want to know, under your guidance, why the wine goes bad and why it becomes sour. Sir, I beg you. Gretel rubbed his temples. Under the expectant gaze of the necromancer apprentice, he finally sighed. Okay, then you do this first. It doesn't matter if someone sees the money in the subject, or if they really have this problem. If they want to do it, just let them do it. At Gretel's request, a cart full of wine was delivered to the mage's tower. Along with the wine, there was a barrel of lees, 3 or 4 barrels of semi-finished products at various stages, raw materials, yeast, and 2 barrels of an unknown liquid that had failed to ferment and exuded a sour smell. The spellcaster apprentices who passed by it all looked sideways and covered their noses. Leon Carlos, among a group of boys and girls who were fighting each other and almost wanted to leave first, Greed pointed to the 2 carts of wine barrels and said to Leon, "Go and choose a room as a laboratory to study this thing. Use your newly learned techniques of bacterial culture, staining, and identification to check it out. There is something in these spoiled wines that is the result of brewing. There is no such thing as a successful wine. Yes, Mr. Nordmark, Leon stood at attention and saluted. He then hesitated. Then sir, do I still want to continue taking the class later? Of course I will. What are you thinking about? I still have a project for you to do. A total of 10 students successfully passed the first round of bacterial culture experiments. There were 3 people from the Black Crow Swamp, 1 person each from the Transformation Department and the Spell Department. 2 young ladies from the Natural God cult passed the test hand in hand, and 3 people passed through the God of War Temple. Temple of the Spring Goddess. Completely annihilated. In Greet's opinion, when they washed the sea stone flowers and beef, they should really wash them more cleanly. For the 10 people who passed, Greet gave them extra homework. In groups of 5, one group cultured Staphylococcus aureus and the other group cultured Mycobacterium tuberculosis. After both groups were very familiar with each other, they were asked to add various strange things to the petri dish. Cheese crumbles. Moldy scraps of clothing. Suspensions are made from soil dug from various places. All petri dishes are divided into N groups, 18 degrees, 20 degrees, 25 degrees, add blood to the culture medium, add corn paste, various pH levels, with light, no light, use magic to induce birth, not use magic to induce birth. Each person has one experimental table and one experimental cabinet. There are hundreds of petri dishes on the shelves, neatly arranged one on top of another. Every person has 100 petri dishes per day, and 10 people are equal to 1,000. If 10 people are not enough, you can add 20. If 20 is not enough, you can add 24. If you can't make it with 24 people, it's a big deal and you'll have to collect more. Gretel hummed and glanced at the petri dishes in front of him as if he were looking at the green and swaying wheat fields. Well, this is the correct way to do research. As a subject leader, I don't have dozens of graduate students and doctoral students to help me with the work. I have to do everything myself. Not to mention whether it should be so tiring, the efficiency is completely unbearable. It's good now. Gretel happily left the task of finding penicillin, streptomycin, and God knows what other M&Ems to the apprentices. As for himself, he concentrated on teaching these students and encouraging their growth. Don't just look at it with a microscope. Cultivate it. Cultivate it. Don't you need to cultivate it when you make wine? Concentrated salt water crystallizes. When cooling down, you must pay attention to maintaining a stable temperature. Is the water bath just for you to look at? Is the thing I bought with 1,000 contribution points just for you to use as a decoration? No, then use it. Record. Make good records. Did I give you a pen and paper to eat? Last night, the last experiment, what was the ratio of your culture medium? Look, you can't remember, right? A good memory is not as good as a bad pen. Under such high-intensity practice and operation, not to mention the students' research level, their proficiency at least increased very quickly. 20 days later, the bacterial culture operation assessment was conducted for the 3rd time, and all employees finally passed the test. At noon that day, Leon Carlos, who took on the task of winemaking research, excitedly rushed into Greet's study with a petri dish in his left hand and a petri dish in his right hand. Sir. Mr. Nordmark. I found it. I found it. Some batches of yeast used for brewing contain some bacteria that are not found in good wine. But there are some in the wine that failed to brew. I speculate, it's these bacteria that cause fermented wine to turn sour. I seem to remember that this is indeed the case. Are there bacteria in the yeast, or are there bacteria in the raw materials? Gretel nodded. Okay, then you can do a few experiments to verify it. Is it here? Or help you find a wine shop? Greet just casually said that the accountant at the Department of Public Health, the middle-aged man who had been asked by many industry associations to do more research, took it seriously. After receiving the message, he immediately went to the liquor guild. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, the carriage in which the guild leader himself was riding stopped in front of Gretel's mage tower. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Leon Carlos, as an employee of the Department of Public Health and a commissioner sent by the Magic Council to study the problem of wine acidification, was personally accompanied by the president and entered the largest winery in the upper reaches of the Smith River. The wine shop was filled with smoke. A strange sour smell permeated everywhere. As soon as the middle-aged accountant stepped in, he started to frown frequently. Leon, however, showed no signs of discomfort, looking around with a nostalgic look on his face. A long time ago, his father once took him through this winery, watching from a distance and pointing it out to him. The quality of the wine that year was particularly good, and their family's financial situation was also good. My father once said that it would be great if he could build such a large winery in his lifetime. The president bent slightly, pressed his right hand on his right rib habitually, looked over the middle-aged accountant, and looked at Leon carefully. After walking through the crushing tank and the fermentation room, he suddenly grabbed a middle-aged accountant, walked 2 steps behind, and asked him in a low voice, "What's this mage's last name? Is his surname Carlos?" "Yes, it's me." Leon paused and blurted out. That afternoon, when he left the winery and got into the carriage, he found a thick, patterned deed on the seat of the carriage. Carlos Winery. Thanks to @Panther 2017 for tipping 100 starting coins. 3,000 words. Another update completed. There's only one left. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 293. Leon Carlo slowly leaned down, clasped his hands and hung them in front of his ankles, trapping the parchment between his chest and thighs. On the parchment, there is the imprint of the town hall, the signatures of the buyer and witnesses, the address of the workshop, and 5 years ago, when my father sold this workshop, he left his signature and fingerprints on the deed. It was an inheritance passed down from great-grandfather to grandfather, and from grandfather to father. It was once thought that the family could rely on this industry to settle down and live. When he first started on the path of a mage, he secretly thought that it would be great if he could buy it back when he became an official mage in the future. But he never thought that now, at this time, it would have been delivered to him. Leon curled up on the carriage seat for a moment, straightened up, and looked carefully at the precious parchment again. Under the father's signature, there are 2 other lines of transaction records. The handwriting is exactly the same and fresh. One line is the last owner of the wine shop, transferred to the guild president who received him today, and the other line. The seller and introducer have all signed and stamped. The buyer's column is still empty. As long as he fills it in and fills in his name, he can get the winery that has been passed down by his family for decades and where he played in when he was a child. Leon looked all the way steadily. After returning to the mage tower, he held the deed paper and knocked on the door of Gretel's study. "The boss gave it to you." Gretel picked up the deed and looked at it carefully. "Your family's previous property, do you want it?" I think I shouldn't want it." Leon swallowed and shifted his weight from his left foot to his right foot. "It's so expensive, I mean, it feels like a bribe." "It's good that it's expensive." Gretel twisted the corner of the deed paper, saw Leon's nervous eyes, and let go. "From the boss's point of view, it won't be a loss if he gives you this thing. After all, you are the person in charge of the project. The faster you study and the more attentive you are, the success rate will increase by 10% even if you produce results 1 month in advance. Percent looking like this, he made enough money from just one workshop. I remember that a barrel of wine costs dozens of gold coins. Yes, Sir Leon breathed a sigh of relief and shifted his focus back to his left foot. It depends on the age and the place of production. The cheapest one costs more than 10 gold coins per barrel, and the most expensive one costs more than dozens of gold coins. If someone orders in advance and a batch of wine goes bad, they will lose hundreds of dollars. 1,000 gold coins is also possible. Well, do you want to take this? Gretel clicked on the parchment on the table, pressed the corner of the paper, and pushed it forward a little. Leon took a step back reflexively. No, sir, I don't think I should take it. This project, which is coming from the Department of Public Health, is what you directed me to do, and it was done using the conditions in your mage tower. If anyone should have, it's not me, it's you. Gretel smiled slightly. Very good, this apprentice named Leon has a very clear mind. If he had chosen this winery, or had chosen it just now, it would not have happened to him, but his research work here would have ended here. Well, since you don't want it, just give the deed to the accountant and ask him to return it for you. By the way, for your winemaking project, it's best to involve a priest from the religion of nature to do it together. They know how to promote bacteria. Hurry up and finish it, there are other projects for you. Yes, Mr. Nordmark. We'll find someone tomorrow. There's an anatomy class tonight. Okay, Mr. Nordmark. Be sure to arrive on time. Gretel's training has reached the second stage. After passing the bacterial culture operation assessment, the students have almost done the cultivation, staining, and microscopic examination of more than a dozen pathogenic bacteria that Greet has accumulated. The next work is to work hard to improve their proficiency, and to memorize it to death. Map, recognize this bacteria when you see it. The second stage is to infect various animals with pathogenic bacteria, then dissect them, observe the pathogenic organs and tissues, and repeat the sampling, culture, and testing work again. The experimental animals brought over by the order of the God of Nature soon became insufficient. Well, mainly different diseases require different animals. For example, mice and guinea pigs are sensitive to Mycobacterium tuberculosis, diphtheria bacilli, Yersinia pestis, and Vibrio cholerae. Cats are sensitive to anthrax and amoebic dysentery, rabbits are sensitive to Salmonella and Escherichia coli, and ferrets are sensitive to measles. Therefore, those who passed the training in the second and third batches of the God of Nature order received the task of catching mice, guinea pigs, and cats all over the mountains and plains. Ferrets. Live ferrets are very valuable and must be purchased. Now, what they want to dissect is a batch of rabbits infected with E. coli and suffering from vomiting and diarrhea. Groups of 4, 1 rabbit per group. The 8 necromancers quickly divided into 2 groups. They caught the rabbit, tied it to a wooden board, shaved its abdominal hair, and made all preparations. Among the 8 people, there were 6 or 7 with burning eyes, staring at the rabbit eagerly. I come. I come. The magicians of the 2 transformation departments and the 2 medical branches are not slow either. Just after tying up the rabbit, each person holds a scalpel in his hand, and you push me around. This rabbit should be killed first. You want it, right? How to kill? You come. Why don't you come? Gretel silently glanced at the right side of the laboratory. 3 dissecting tables were lined up in a row. The god of war priests had firm eyes and the scalpels in their hands were as steady as a rock. The priest of the spring temple who accompanied them had no rabbit fur, no rabbit droppings, or even a blade of grass on his clothes. He looked determined and wanted to experiment. Even worse are the order of the nature god. 4 trainee priests occupied a table. Now there were no rabbits, no people, nothing on the table. Are you trying to skip class? Greet thought for a moment, whether to reason with those students or talk to them about physics. NMR Nordmark, the door to the anatomy room opened with a bang. 2 men, 2 women, and 4 teenagers hurried in. Gretel raised his head and glanced at them. Otherwise, why don't you do the dissection and just watch others do it? Mr. Nordmark, the tall girl in the lead, stopped immediately, and the people behind him almost collided with her before they could break in time. The girl took a bow step forward, her waist sank, but she resisted it as if nothing had happened, lowered her head and saluted. "I'm very sorry, but we didn't mean to be late." "I'm not blaming you either," Gretel organized his words. "You are the servants of the god of nature. If you kill too many animals, will it affect your development and reduce your affinity with nature? Or should you just sit back and watch? But the rabbits are raised by you, and if you watch others do it, but you yourself don't save it, it won't have an impact, right?" "No. Sir. We have made it? That blank ring in the petri dish you want." Gretel was overjoyed and ran out. "Sorry, I only have 2,000 words this morning. I will try my best to achieve 4,000 words in the afternoon. Thanks to @Bawang Pastoral for the 300 starting coins. Thanks to @Spoon8321 for the 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right?" Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 294. Chapter 294 Penicillin, grow out the penicillium first. Greet was extremely happy. He rushed out of the anatomy room on the ground floor and ran to the P4 laboratory upstairs. He began to cast blessing spells on himself one by one. Oil the soles of your feet. The lightness of cats. Jump. That's enough for you. Behind him, Master Lin An was holding his robe and ran up one floor before he was thrown half a floor away. Seeing Gretel, he couldn't help shouting. "There are only 2 floors in total. You have cast 3 spells." With a meow, the black cat jumped up, expanded, and expanded again in mid-air, turning into a giant black panther with a shoulder height of 1.8 meters. He lowered his head, picked up Master Lin An's collar, and rushed up the stairs. Gretel really couldn't be unhappy. From the time when he arranged this research project, from the time when he was still at the original site of the laboratory, searching for melons from all over the world, or even earlier, from the time when he rescued the old dwarf in the forging area and cultured tubercle bacilli from the old dwarf's sputum. He was waiting for this day. Penicillin. Or, other antibiotics that can secrete lysozyme. Streptomycin, oxytetracycline, even a little gentamicin would be good. The only things that could stop him were the caution of a doctor and the fear of a massive leak of infectious bacteria as a researcher. Even though Greet's hands were shaking with excitement, he followed the safety operating procedures and meticulously wore a mask, gloves, washed hands, and put on protective clothing. After all the students had finished dressing, by the way, Mr. Trochka was grabbed by the back of the neck by the golden skeleton as usual and rushed outside. He opened the door, entered, closed the door, and opened the inner airtight door, layer by layer. Enter the core laboratory. The P4 laboratory in the Mage Tower has been greatly modified compared to Gretel's original version. A particularly important point is that the original single channel has been made into 3 areas and 2 channels: animal culture area, anatomy area, bacterial culture area, and experimental area. Each room is independent, with clean channels in and contaminated channels out. Do you want to enter the red zone and then retreat to the clean corridor like the last time the judges came to visit? Impossible. The door has one-way access and is controlled by the tower spirit. The large team of people rushed straight to the bacterial culture area. Under the guidance of the reporting student, Greet held up the petri dish and looked at the light carefully. Without the need for additional sampling, slide preparation, staining, or microscope, he could see the abnormality on the petri dish with his naked eyes. Among the yellowish bacterial colonies that covered the bottom of the petri dish, there was a large area that looked translucent and looked like glass. On the outside of the blank area, large swaths of Staphylococcus aureus were squeezing together, but they could not make a step forward. In the center of the blank area, a small piece of green mold stood proudly and proudly. That's it. This is what I want. Gretel turned around suddenly. Even though he was wrapped in a protective suit and his voice was buzzing, he couldn't stop him from raising his voice excitedly. Which group did this experiment? Our group. A clear female voice answered. Gretel turned his head and saw a tall student, only half a head shorter than himself, stepping out from the crowd and standing in front of him. Considering that there are only 2 women in this batch of apprentices, and the other one is a little man of 1.5 meters, no need to ask, it must be the one who brought the wild boar. Very good. Greet nodded heavily, trying hard to suppress his intense heartbeat. As a group, your previous work will be suspended and you will concentrate on studying these green things in the petri dish. I want you to cultivate and purify it, find out why it makes bacteria afraid to get close, and prepare a large amount of that substance. Congratulations, everyone, you may have found a new way to combat the plague. In the room, all 24 students were shocked. Especially the 8 people in Black Crow Swamp, their breathing suddenly became heavy and they took a step forward reflexively. It's a pity that even if their eyes are green, not everyone can participate in the project. The third batch of students who passed the assessment were defined by Greet as poor students and were not qualified to participate in the project at all. They can only work hard and practice more, hoping that next time there is a new exam, they can turn around in one fell swoop. This alone eliminated 1/3 of the people. The first and second batches are not accessible to everyone. Among the first 10 people who passed the examination, the 5 who were infected with Mycobacterium tuberculosis should do whatever they were supposed to do. Mycobacterium tuberculosis is not sensitive to penicillin but is sensitive to streptomycin. These 5 people, as well as the second batch of 3 subsequent people who passed the examination and joined their work, have to continue to work hard. Want to do something new for a change? Thinking too much? In the end, only the young lady from the Natural God Church, with 2 necromancers, a medical magician, a war priest, and 3 people who joined later, made penicillin in a dark way. According to the instructions of the young lady, each person is in a group and first makes various culture media and cultivates them in large quantities. Then, Greet listened to them wailing in various ways for 2 days in a row. I'm dying. Corona, I'm done with this too, give me some more. No, it's not possible. It's half dead, Corona, why are you raising it so well? Can't we necromancers keep this kind of thing? There is too much death aura on it. It can't survive with anything. Let me tell you, when I'm at home, I can't even keep catnip alive. Don't talk nonsense, aren't you still feeding the bacteria? Bacteria are plagues. Isn't it right for necromancers to feed plagues? But this thing is not a plague. It is to restrain the plague. It's normal if I can't feed it. If I can feed it, I will be killed by it. Got it? Greet snickered beside him. How can it be so easy to cultivate penicillium? If the nutrient ratio of the culture medium is wrong, the pH is wrong, and the oxygen content of the air is wrong, it will either not grow or grow less, or it will not ferment or ferment less. Without fermentation, it will produce less penicillin, and it will be a waste of time. In the history of the previous life, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928, and after 5 years of hard work, he turned to sulfa. In 1938, German chemist Ernst Chain began purification experiments, and by the winter of 1940, a little bit of penicillin was refined. In 1941, Australian pathologist Florey increased the production of penicillin from 2 units per cubic centimeter to 40 units. It was not until 1942 that mass production of penicillin began. So in those spy movies, people started grabbing penicillin during the Long March. Well, I suggest the crew turn their target to sulfonamide. So many of the world's top scientists worked hard to create penicillin that could be mass-produced. If Gretel hadn't had the support of magical powers to work out miracles, he wouldn't have dared to take part in this project. All in all, come on, boys and girls. I'm so tired, I just wrote 4,000 words today. There is one more update left, I will pay it back, I will definitely pay it back. And worship, Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin, is such a tough guy. He worked at the age of 16, and received an inheritance of £250 at the age of 20. His brother suggested him to study medicine, and then, in July of that year. Note that this is the year. Passed the exam in 16 courses. Enter the University of London. You asked me to take a year off from work to review after 4 years of work, and I couldn't even pass 6 courses. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 295. Chapter 295 Penicillin Experiment. Penicillium was stolen. The miraculous plant oxytocin, no, microbial oxytocin, gave Greet the confidence to launch the penicillin project. And this magical technique really lived up to his expectations. After a week, enough penicillium was reproduced to be able to be used for experiments. And the priest apprentices of the Natural God Church have bred enough rats for them to conduct a luxurious experiment. In the dissection room on the first floor of the Master Tower, 24 apprentices were divided into 6 experimental tables, each facing a cage of rats. In the crowd, the 2 teenagers from the Natural God sect looked nervous and whispered. Use it sparingly, don't kill yourself by being careless. It's so pitiful that their experience of raising rats makes everyone cry when they hear it, and sad when they see it. Specialized breeding companies, no, specially formulated mouse feed, no, mice with stable conditions, no germs, and having lived in the laboratory for several generations, no. It is up to the priests of the god of nature to dig out the mouse holes themselves, catch them, and let the mother mice give birth to pups, and then raise them after they have given birth. If the mouse is irritable and frightened, use animal friendly to appease it. If it doesn't know the feed ratio, its animal communication skills are top notch. If it wants to be free of germs, use healing spells every day. The priest's apprentice's healing skills were limited, and he was reluctant to use them even if he bumped into them. He just hit the rats. It is not an exaggeration to say that rats raised in this way are the lifeblood of priests. Now take it out for experiments and use 120 of them at one go. It's incredible. However, raising rats for 100 days and using rats for a while, Greet ordered to use them, but they couldn't help but resist. The 4 priest apprentices could only gather around a table and look at Gretel with sad eyes as he demonstrated to the students. Lift the rat's tail with your right hand and place it on the lid of the rat cage. When the mouse struggles to crawl forward, use your left thumb and index finger to grasp the mouse's ears and neck skin. With the mouse in the palm of your left hand, use the ring finger and little finger of your left hand to pinch its back skin and tail. Do you understand everything? The movements must be steady and accurate. If you don't catch it well once, you have to let go and catch it again. Be careful of being bitten. Come on, everyone can catch one by themselves. This sentence is like pouring a ladle of cold water into a boiling pan. In an instant, the entire anatomy room was noisy. Of the 24 students, 20 were shouting. Ouch! It bit me. Run away. Run away. Mr. Trochka. Help, no, don't kill it. Ah! I squeezed the shit out of it. The 4 priest apprentices of the god of nature looked at each other in confusion. Can catching mice be a problem? Isn't it just a matter of reaching out and grabbing it? Gretel was already prepared for this. Well, when they first started doing animal experiments, the classmates in their class also looked like this, and they were no better than these spellcasters. With great patience, he looked at each table and gave instructions one by one. Grab the tail quickly. Be accurate. No, don't scratch the base of the tail. Grab the middle part of the tail. You don't have to use so much force. Do you think you're going to have to break off your tail? If it doesn't work, just carry it around a few times to make it faint. Hey, why did you throw it away on your own? Mr. Trochka, please help to catch it. Then pinch its ears, don't pinch the neck. Don't press. Don't pull. With a click, the mouse died. Greet rubbed his forehead. Pulling the rat's tail and pressing its cervical vertebrae at the same time is the way to kill a rat, classmate. I haven't learned this lesson yet. Okay, you can catch another one. Fortunately, I have a spare supply. Just the act of catching a mouse has gone through all kinds of upsets. Mr. Trochka was very popular among them. Finally, after much stumbling, the experiment reached the stage of subcutaneously inoculating the mice with Staphylococcus aureus. Gretel showed them again. It is obviously a simple subcutaneous injection action, much simpler than intraperitoneal injection, intracranial injection, etc. I have to go around the table again to correct all the wrong behaviors of the apprentices. Keep your hands steady. The more the mouse struggles, the more steady your hands must be. Stop. It's too late, you'll poke yourself. Don't squeeze it so hard. The mouse can't escape. Forget it, it's dead after squeezing it, just change it. Insert the needle flat. Don't be vertical. Don't be crooked. Look, you pricked your finger. Don't insert the needle too deep. Wait, the blood is so fierce. Did you puncture a major artery or something? Subcutaneous. Subcutaneous. Insert the needle flatly, and then lift the needle up. Lift it flatly, not the needle tip upwards. Oops, the skin has been poked through, forget it, insert the needle at another site. This kind of thing can be made by a skilled master with ease, but by a novice who doesn't know how to make it, it can be made in a variety of ways and in a hurry. Even though Gretel was fully mentally prepared, they still made him feel confused and his blood pressure soared to 20 mm Hg. It was not easy to complete the hypodermic injection experiment, during which 10 mice were killed, 4 students pricked their fingers, overturned penicillin test tubes, broke syringes, and countless other accidents. Finally, 80 mice survived and entered the observation stage. How's the mouse doing today? Normal. Normal. Mine is normal too. The students were calm. The mouse's condition was still normal on the second day, and on the third day. It doesn't eat much anymore. I don't like to move anymore. You look so lethargic. On the fourth and fifth days, the mice's condition deteriorated. By the sixth day, at least half of the group reported that the mice were getting worse, with facial bluish discoloration gradually becoming darker and darker. Its belly is also blue. Where the needle went in, it's all blue. Sir, is it dying? 4 priest apprentices from the Order of the God of Nature and 2 apprentices from the Temple of the God of War looked at Gretel eagerly, just waiting for his words. Gretel took a deep breath. Not necessarily. Bring us the penicillium mold we prepared. They divided the sick mice into 4 groups. One group was given oral administration of penicillium, one group was injected with penicillium subcutaneously, and one group was treated with magic. The other group did nothing and was left as a control. The apprentices wished they could live in the laboratory, staring at the mice with their eyes wide open. Oral penicillium group. This one won't work. Oral group. This one seems to be no longer good. A mage picked up the mouse and observed it. The priest of the God of Nature turned his face and glared at him. The mage shrugged. What's wrong? I am a necromancer. Although we are not compatible with animals, I can feel the breath of death very strongly. Hypodermic group. Hey, sir, this one seems to be doing better. There was a crash, and 25 of the 24 students in the anatomy room suddenly gathered around. The one with more people is Master Lin N. He stretched out his two skinny arms on the outside of the crowd and tried his best to squeeze in. Yes, yes, it is indeed better. The aura of death is not so strong. One day later, 10 of the 20 mice in the subcutaneous injection group were alive and kicking and escaped death. This therapeutic effect is second only to the 20/20ths of the magic group, and much higher than the oral group and the control group that all died. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Gretel clapped his hands and attracted the attention of the students. You have successfully found a natural product that can effectively treat patients in places where magic cannot reach. Now, let us continue our research to find out the appropriate dosage of this product and make it into a potion, how to carry it long distance. Yeah. Long live. We made it. 20 or so surgical caps flew up to the ceiling. White, gray, blue. As for the material of the surgical cap, Gretel allowed them to use it freely, as long as it could wrap the hair tightly and not hinder the operation. So, in this wave of celebrations, he also saw two touches of green, one falling together, the other falling. After a short celebration, the students entered the long experimental process. This time, more culture media were produced to promote the growth of penicillium, sugar agar culture medium, blood agar culture medium, beef extract culture medium, wort culture medium, cornmeal culture medium, potato sucrose culture medium. The entire laboratory, no, the entire mage tower, seemed to have turned into a big kitchen. Steaming, boiling, crushing, filtering, it's steaming all day long. If the students don't want to eat, they can just drink the culture medium to fill their stomachs. Of course, no one actually does this. In the words of Leon Carlos, I know that word smells bad, but I really didn't know that beef extract smells worse than it. It's disgusting, this smell. Greet allows students to use their imaginations and experiment with various recipes. It is definitely a waste, but fortunately there is a fire element pool in the mage tower, which provides endless heat. Those sea stone flowers, beef, sheep blood, you can buy a lot of them with just one contribution point, so you don't have to worry about not being able to afford them. Corn, potatoes, etc. Just kidding, that stuff doesn't even count on money. In the midst of the mass production boom, the 4 priest apprentices of the god of nature have become leaders of the students. Especially the girl who caught the wild boar. She basically no longer does culture media. She spends 2 hours every day wandering in the laboratory, half closing her eyes, sensing the culture dishes one by one. This, can't. It's basically not long. This, it grows a little slowly, you can keep an eye on it. This one grows up pretty fast. This, can you raise the temperature a little? I have to say that you can always trust the biological affinity ability of the god of nature priest. Of course, except Gretel, the imposter. After 10 days, they had sifted out all meat and blood raw materials and began to specialize in corn flour, corn liquor, cornstarch, wheat flour, potato flour. After reaching this point, more than half of the 24 students were so tired that their eyes were crooked, their mouths were slanted, and their facial features were distorted. Greet himself felt a little unable to bear it, so he waved his hand generously and allowed them to go home and relax. Take a good rest for 2 days. When we come back, we will start a new project. The students let out a cheer and dispersed. Gretel couldn't wait to rush out of the mage tower and go to the beach to breathe fresh air. Just kidding, he has been doing experiments for so many days and he hasn't even been exposed to the sun. If he doesn't go out for a walk, he will be deficient in vitamin D. Gretel played happily for most of the day. When I returned to the mage tower, I received a blow in the head. Penicillin strains were stolen. Today I asked in the group what accidents have occurred when you performed subcutaneous injection experiments on mice, and then I heard all kinds of blood and tears. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 296. The management of Gretel Mage Tower is really not strict. After all, the only official members of the Mage Tower are Gretel, Aurora, and the guest mage Lynn. With just 2.5 people, there seems to be no need to deliberately establish rules. There are 123 rules for the management of the Mage Tower. What? Student. Of those 24 apprentices, 30% are students and 70% are coolies. They can harvest a year's worth of wool at most, and the possibility of taking it for themselves is about zero. Therefore, Gretel basically had a free-spirited attitude towards them. As long as you work well and don't get into fights, what you want to do or learn after class has nothing to do with me. Based on the above, there is only one thing that Greet strictly controls, the P4 laboratory management system. There are 3 areas and 2 passages, no wandering, please pay attention to cleanliness when entering and exiting the laboratory, and absolutely, do not allow anything in the laboratory to be taken out of the laboratory. No space equipment is allowed in or out. Most of those bacteria are deadly infectious bacteria, and they can kill people if they are taken out. Talking about you. A bunch of crow swamp guys. Outside of the P4 laboratory, Gretel's control was very loose. Whether it is culture media, infected animals, or penicillin for breeding, you can just put it there casually, as long as you remember to close the door. Are these things being taken out? Well, just take it out, no one will die anyway. So, Greet took Aurora, Lynn, and Bernard, who was just for fun, to go shopping for a long time. When they came back from having dinner in the commercial street, they were a little confused when they heard that the penicillin strain was stolen. What? Who stole it? Why did you steal this? It's not like Shanghai in 1945. A penicillin is worth a small yellow croaker, and it's worth risking one's life to steal. What are the strains that are being bred to be stolen? I haven't done any breeding yet, I haven't purified it yet, I haven't made it into penicillin sodium or procaine penicillin. Well, forget about the latter. With the level of chemical industry in this world, I probably won't be able to make it in this lifetime, but what can be done by stealing the bacteria? Moss doesn't know why he stole this. Tolling was still the same non-male and non-female electronic voice with no ups and downs. Even if the answer he spat out was "I don't know," there was no hint of doubt or guilt. Answer the questions one by one. The person who stole the strain was the mage apprentice Kevin Aney. Moss recorded the video of Mage Aney obtaining the strain and leaving the Mage Tower. The master can watch it in the control room. Mage apprentice. Why is it him? Greet and Aurora asked together. When Greet thought about it, even if someone could steal penicillin, it would probably be from the Spring Temple, or at most, from the God of War Temple. The Magic Council is still worried that it won't get something. When he gets the results of his research, the matter of mass production will naturally be left to the Magic Council. Is there any need to steal? They quickened their pace at the same time and walked towards the elevator. Behind the two of them, Master Lin An quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Thank God, that guy who stole things was not from Black Crow Swamp. After I breathed a sigh of relief, my mind started to race and keep racing. Master Lin An has experienced hundreds of battles and has had countless fights with the Lord of Glory Church. At this moment, he instinctively thinks about the worst. Why steal important research results? What is the origin of that mage apprentice? Is he the spy from the other side? Moss, what school of thought does Kevin Ani belong to? Who is his mentor? What is his resume? Why didn't you stop him? He asked a lot of questions in one breath. At this time, the elevator has reached the top of the tower. The tower spirit plays the video for the owner, retrieves the information, and replies hummingly. Kevin Aney, 14 years old, apprentice of a magician in the magic department, medical branch. Mentor, Billy Ogland, a level 7 magician, affiliated with Cow's Magic Academy. The master has not granted Moss authority to prevent others. Take everything below the second floor out of the mage tower. Lynn was speechless. He glared at Gretel fiercely. You don't care, I told you to take it easy. It turns out he's from the medical branch. Gretel breathed a sigh of relief. I say, there is no love without reason, and there is no hatred without reason. It is natural for the medical branch to be interested in penicillin. Maybe he stole it back and gave it to his teacher to study. That's it? Then when he comes back tomorrow, I'll ask him. Gretel yawned. I'm full and a little sleepy. No, on the left and right, Aurora and Lynn retorted in unison. Aurora simply reached out and pushed his shoulder. Go to the teacher. Go now. People from the conjuration system have stolen things and sneaked into our mage tower. You're right, let's go now, Lynn followed up slowly. What if he is a spy? What if his teacher is a spy? What if he is robbed by a spy while walking on the road? If you report the crime now, the responsibility will be his. If you are lazy, the responsibility will be yours. But Gretel felt that it was not so serious in his heart. He was still looking around. It's very late now, the train has stopped, let's do it tomorrow. Go now, Lin An pushed him, I summon the phantom pony. Accompany you up the mountain. Meow dash. Mr. Trochka roared sharply and raised his paws to encourage his master. The black shadow behind him was about to move, hesitating and vomiting. It looked like it could transform into a black panther at any time and come to grab Gretel's back collar. Under the urging and even coercion of his two friends, Gretel finally let Tolling copy a copy of the magic crystal image and rushed to the top of the mountain. There's nothing I can do. He has a level 3 opponent and 2 level 5 opponents, so he can't beat them. Of course, he didn't have anyone to accompany him, nor did he summon a magic horse. Instead, he activated the teleportation technique carried on the endless ink pen, relied on his own strength, and teleported directly to Igor's mystery lock. Greet walked into the Thunder Tower with familiarity and reported to Archmage Carlyle. The Archmage was indeed angry. What is it? A thief has come to Thunder Point. Where is the image? Did you bring it? Show me. Greet quickly handed over the magic crystal. Archmage Hire inserted the chip into the gap on the table, and in a moment a light curtain opened in the study. Archmage Carlyle watched intently, becoming angrier as he watched, and slapped the table hard. The paper, pens, and books on the table floated instantly, with electric light flashing around the edges. And in the center of the desk, the small hand-operated generator made a snapping sound, and the fuse melted again. Let's go, he stretched out his hand to grab Gretel. Follow me to Wanfa Pagoda and settle the score with that old guy. Level 14 versus level 3, Gretel had no power to resist. He staggered and rushed out while being grabbed by him. The Wanfa Tower of the Conjuration School is far away from the Thunder Tower of the Evocation School, located on both sides of the Babel Tower. Archmage Carlyle's arrogance increased with every step he took, and he rushed into the Wanfa Tower. When he walked out of the elevator on the 23rd floor, the electric light on his body had already triggered a warning from the tower spirit. Please pay attention, mage. Please pay attention, mage. Your energy level jump is too dangerous. Please control yourself to avoid triggering the tower spirit defense. Archmage Carlyle ignored him. He dragged Gretel, strode forward, and rushed straight into a laboratory. There was a loud bang, and the laboratory door slammed back. A tall red-haired man looked up from the microscope, frowned and shouted angrily. "Carlyle!" He stretched out his hand and a colorful light flew out, entangled and shot towards the door. Greet ducked back reflexively. The two high-level mages were fighting and arguing. They might just say hello or express their dissatisfaction. The defensive spells hanging on their bodies could be dispelled at any time. Do you want to take a hit yourself, haha. Especially the one opposite is level 15. Level 15. One level higher than Archmage Carlyle. Your Excellency, Archmage, you must block it. Archmage Carlyle really lived up to his expectations. With a flick of his hand, a force field wall rose up, protecting Gretel tightly. Then he yelled. "Old Morton! Your apprentice's apprentice stole something and came to our thunder horn." "What?" Master Morton was stunned. He subconsciously waved his hand, and the test tubes, flasks, and petri dishes on the table clattered and flew out. Gretel hid behind Archmage Carlyle, and his eyes widened in fear on the spot. "Ah! Don't fall! Don't fall! What is in this? Don't be an infectious germ." Archmage Carlyle seemed to have sensed this. He raised his fingers slightly, and the gentle breeze on the ground picked up and held up the things that flew out. The two great mages, one holding it and the other collecting it, quickly gathered the things together. Only then did Master Morton have the time to ask. "What's going on? Which disciple of mine? What are you stealing?" Archmage Carlyle slapped the chip directly in front of him. The light curtain opened again, revealing a sneaky young man who slipped into the laboratory, bottled the contents of the petri dish, carried it in his arms, and took it back to the dormitory. He packed up his things and left the mage tower with his luggage. The figure in the light curtain became farther and farther away and smaller, but the young man never looked back. Archmage Carlyle said coldly. "Kevin Aney, an apprentice in your department. The Department of Public Health is recruiting people recently." As he spoke, he stepped aside and let Greet out, indicating that it was his business. Gretel quickly nodded to Master Morton and saluted. Archmage Carlyle pointed at Gretel and stood beside him and continued. "That kid was sent to his mage tower, and he ended up doing something like this." "I've heard about this." Old Morton nodded. He had heard about the establishment of the Department of Public Health and Gretel, the third-level mage who had obtained the high-level mage tower. Several companies in the medical branch were snatching up the research projects released by the mage tower, and he even came out to say hello. Thinking of this, the Archmage felt a little bad in his heart. Who is his mentor? A resume was attached when I sent it here. That boy's mentor is Billy Oglin. "Old Morton, is that your apprentice?" Master Morton choked. His face turned from red to white, then from white to red, and his fists clenched loudly. After a moment of silence, he pulled out the chip from the experimental table, put it away carefully, and walked towards Archmage Carlyle. "Oglin is my apprentice. Let's go and take a look. As long as there is that boy under Oglin, I will definitely give you an explanation." The three of them left the mage tower together. Master Morton strode straight towards the north side of Igor Peak. When they came to the edge of the cliff, Gretel originally thought there would be a magic carpet, or at least a phantom pony or something to ride on, but unexpectedly, Master Morton grabbed his wrist with his backhand and jumped out. "Ah!" Gretel screamed uncontrollably. "This side is a cliff. It's a cliff. Falling straight down to a depth of more than 200 meters. He doesn't want to become a lich now?" 3,200 words. I completed 6,000 words today, and the last update is completed. You can only write 4,000 words tomorrow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 297. Dash. Gretel's screams shook the night sky. From the top of the Tower of Babel, a beam of white light immediately shot down, covering Gretel's forehead. Gretel had just felt a little relieved when the white light swept out again, swept out, swept out. Who controls the searchlight? It can't be from Black Crow Swamp. At a height of more than 200 meters, it would probably break me. If I break it, I won't be able to transform into a lich. Greet thought angrily. The next moment, his shoulder blades tightened suddenly on his back, and his falling speed suddenly slowed down. Gretel turned his head and saw a pair of wings sticking out from his back, half empty and half real, full of light. Wingspan, forgive him for his incompetence in visual inspection, but the length of one wing alone is more than twice his own size. The pair of wings flapped once, then spread flatly and froze. The strong mountain wind, supported by the wings, immediately changed the fall into a glide. Greet looked to the left, and saw Master Morton squinting at him from the corner of his eye, with a face full of words. To the right, Archmage Carlyle's face was full of hatred for iron, and with a finger, a wisp of breeze enveloped his voice and penetrated carefully his eardrum. How can you scream like this? With our two great magicians here, why do you think you will fall to death? If it doesn't work, you should quickly use the feather falling technique. I'm not afraid that the three monks will have no water to eat. Do you two think that the other will take care of me? As for the feather falling technique, I really forgot about it when I was scared. Gretel said. It was indeed my own negligence, but Master Morton went too far. Without saying a word, he took me off the cliff. However, the situation was stronger than the person, and there were still wings summoned by others hanging on his back, so he couldn't protest on the spot. Master Morton flicked his fingers gently, controlling the wings to change directions, hovering in the air, and riding the wind down. It may take more than an hour to run a distance on the ground, but it only took them a quarter of an hour to land lightly. The illusory wings shattered silently, turning into dots of starlight and returning to Master Morton's palm. The great magician then cast a spell and pointed in the direction it floated. This way. Gretel threw several acceleration spells at himself before catching up with the speed of the two great magicians. It was dark at night, and the Cow's Magic Academy was quiet. However, when he walked near the laboratory, a light came into view. Walking further, I heard a drake whose voice was changing speaking in the laboratory. Teacher, look, this is what it looks like. Culture this mold and inject it into sick mice. 10 of the 20 mice survived. Teacher, please do some research. Didn't you say that when it comes to medical treatment, the medical branch of our conjuration system is the king? Those priests and so on, we pioneered the way, and they just used it. Those people we don't even know how to draw spell models. We still have to do research on curing diseases. There was silence in the laboratory for a moment. Archmage Carlyle's thick eyebrows were raised, and he wanted to kick in the door, but Master Morton raised his hand to stop him. The magician from the medical branch looked forward quietly, his red hair motionless in the night wind, like a solidified flame. Gretel just glanced at him and felt that the air around him was a little thinner. The sound of pouring water, the sound of glass crashing, and the sound of bubbling. After a while, the male duck whispered again. Teacher, I think we should step up our research on this thing. For the treatment of diseases, priests can rush to do it. We don't necessarily have to let the plasticity system overwhelm us. That magician is only level 3. In terms of research, I'm sure I can't compare to you. Okay Kevin, the other person finally said. It's still not good to do this. After all, it's something made by someone else. I use it for research. How can I explain the source? But tutor, this kind of mold doesn't exist outside. It comes from all kinds of tree roots, grass, and soil. Tutor, didn't you say that if you upgrade to another level, you will lose 200 research points? This project can be completed with more than 200 points. Let me see. What are you thinking about? Master Morton finally said, and with a wave of his hand, the door suddenly opened. Two exclamations suddenly sounded in the laboratory, and as Master Morton strode inside, they immediately turned into panic. Mentor, mentor. Master Morton's face was full of anger and he quickly scanned around. His own disciple, Billy Oglin, stood before him, tongue-tied and flushed. On the experimental table, in the glass bottle, there are dots of green mold. The young man standing next to the experimental table was the one he saw in the light curtain not long ago. Master Morton stared at his disciple, his red hair flying automatically without wind, as if it was burning. Even if Billy Ogland is not one of those he values the most, or even if he has rarely received direct guidance from him in recent years because of his mediocre qualifications, what the disciple does will still affect the honor of the master. Even if this kid was just hesitating and didn't actually steal the results, once the news got out, he wouldn't even have the shame to hang out at the summit. I really didn't know that my disciple would actually want to study stolen things. He burst out from between his teeth. Without waiting for Ogland to defend himself, he suddenly turned around and bowed deeply to Archmage Carlyle and Gretel. My disciple allowed his disciples to steal the results, which is my fault. In today's matter, I will decide how to punish and compensate you. Even if I have to compensate you for my laboratory, I won't give a shit. He said it categorically. Archmage Carlyle sneered. There's no need for a laboratory. It's not like we, Greet, don't have a mage tower, let alone a laboratory. But what do you do with these two? Apprentice mage, be expelled from the house and the academy immediately, Master Morton said without even thinking about it. As for Oglin, he indulged his disciples and did not immediately report and punish his evil deeds. He stopped working at Cow's Academy and went to the New World to station for 5 years to observe the consequences. All his contributions to the guild were as compensation. What do you think? It's easy for him. Archmage Carlyle snorted and turned away. If Ogland's matter is reported to the Parliament, the punishment may be slightly lighter, and I will die in society. For the sake of his teacher, spare him this time. Master Morton turned his attention to Gretel again. Gretel lowered his eyes slightly to express his acquiescence. He didn't really want to beg for mercy, this one was different from the previous Aurora. Aurora was purely curious, or could be said to be mean. For this person, saying for the purpose of illegal possession probably does not unfairly accuse him. Other teachers have punished him, so he doesn't have to be a good person. Master Morton breathed a sigh of relief. He took a step forward, bent slightly, and said to Gretel sincerely, "Don't worry, I will investigate what this kid stole to the end and guarantee that not a single bit will be leaked out. In the future, if someone from the medical branch or other magicians in the council does research without permission, I am the only one asking." "That's not necessary," Gretel smiled. "Actually, you can just leave these things here. If you need them, I can send some more. I hope that magicians in the medical branch and other departments can conduct independent research based on my work and explore the mystery of penicillin together. You won, and collected another 10,000 reward. I can only write 4,000 words this afternoon, but if I can't, I will write 6,000 words tomorrow, and I'll give you a 10,000 reward for more. Thanks to @Fallen Soul for the reward of 2,000 starting coins. Thanks to @ONI, who loves to play roller coasters, and @UNYanjai for the 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Confucian Scholars for the 300 starting coins reward. Thanks to @Brown Sugar Oatmeal for the 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 298. The two great magicians looked over together. Archmage Carlyle frowned deeply. I wanted to stop it, but since it was Gretel's own project, I couldn't speak out at the moment. Archmage Morton, on the other hand, was not only shocked and moved, but also felt deeply ashamed. Well, it doesn't have to be like this, how can we dash? His voice was trembling, and his red hair, which was standing straight just a moment ago, was now limp and almost all hanging down. Greet stopped him sincerely. Your Excellency the Archmage. The relationship between the Conjuration Department and the Medical Department has always been very good with our Thunderhorn. The last time my follower was poisoned, Master Galen Novak personally came to rescue him. It's just that if an apprentice does something wrong, it won't affect our relationship. Besides, isn't the spirit of sharing knowledge and cooperative research what the Magic Council has always advocated? Archmage Carlyle stopped talking. Well, when Aurora was poisoned by electrolytic salt water, they did agree with the medical branch. If it weren't for this, he wouldn't have directly knocked on Morton's door. He would have gone to the review committee through Old Sam and brought the matter to light. Old Morton's face turned red and he still shook his head. Gretel thought for a moment and smiled. Otherwise, can you do me a favor? Regarding the staged research results of penicillium, I will write a paper in the past 2 days. Can you help me find a journal to publish it? Then, if you do subsequent research, remember to quote me. Paper. This is possible. Conducting research on the basis of other people's papers after they have been published is a common and encouraged practice in the Magic Council. The redness on old Morton's face finally faded a little, and he patted his chest. Don't worry, I'll take care of publishing the paper. Also, that penicillium didn't get you for nothing, I'll pay for it. He took off his mage badge and planned to transfer the contribution points. Greet jumped back quickly. No, the compensation has been agreed upon. However, if you want more, you can only go to the trading center and buy it. I won't be polite with my price. I won't ask for more discounts. Old Morton laughed. They say goodbye to each other. Old Morton stayed to watch his disciple pack his things, and then left immediately at dawn, while Archmage Carlyle sent Greet back to the Mage Tower. The horse's hooves were able to slip into the night, until the lights of Chaos Magic Academy were far behind him and could no longer be seen. Archmage Carlyle sighed. Why are you so generous? Are you okay? Gretel shrugged. Archmage Carlyle glared at him with hatred, and if he hadn't been on horseback, he would have almost raised his hand and knocked him on the head. With this precedent, if I want to cooperate with you in the future, I can just steal something first. If I can't steal anything, how can I send an apprentice to beat you up and turn enemies into friends? How dare you invite people to cooperate with such an important thing? Don't you dare send it out directly? Aren't you afraid that after you have worked hard for a long time, they will finish it before you? Hee hee. Gretel lowered his head on horseback and laughed. It wasn't until Archmage Carlyle was so angry that he cancelled the phantom pony and let him fall directly to the ground. Although he was given a feather fall spell at the last moment, he stopped laughing, raised his head and explained. Whether they will make it before me, I don't know. But, I am very sure that they will not be able to make what I plan to make. You just watch. Gretel's article The Discovery of a New Pathogenic Bacteria and the Effect of Penicillium in Containing Bacteria was soon published. In order to rush for time, I did not grab the space in the 2 journals Arcane and Magic, but published it in Death Canopy. Anyway, the first half is also about diseases, and there is nothing wrong with it in a journal of the Necromancy School. And with old Morton's guarantee, the paper reward will not be less than a penny for him. A 3rd-level little magician published an article, a 5th-level mage wrote the 2nd article. This time, Master Lin N replaced Aurora as the paper tool, a 15th-level great magician of the medical branch, a 15th-level necromancer review. Such specifications quickly attracted the attention of magicians. In addition to Master Morton, There are two great magicians in the medical branch, who have aroused great interest in Greet's thesis. We found that this cyan mold has a significant inhibitory effect on the reproduction of Staphylococcus aureus. Culture it together with Staphylococcus aureus in a petri dish, and there will be an obvious empty space in the petri dish. Drop it into the Staphylococcus aureus culture solution, and you can see that the culture solution is obviously clear, and no large-scale reproduction of Staphylococcus aureus was found in the secondary culture. Our next goals are: 1. Study the principle of penicillium inhibiting the growth of Staphylococcus aureus. 2. Study the growth of other pathogens besides Staphylococcus aureus that penicillium can inhibit. 3. Try to make the substance that inhibits Staphylococcus aureus into a portable drug that can be carried with you. In this way, even in places beyond the reach of extraordinary powers, ordinary people can improve their chances of recovery. This is an interesting topic. Well worth the effort. If this kind of drug is developed, it will be easier for everyone to survive even if there is no healer in the team. The three great magicians each led their teams and rushed onto the path guided by Gretel without hesitation. Then, it immediately turned upside down and no one recognized it. Penicillium is growing to death. I'm raising myself to death again. This batch is no longer good, and I have to buy new ones. The casting is over. The materials have been used up. It's okay, go buy it. It's cheap anyway. Hurry up, otherwise it will be sold out. The price of the penicillium that Greet hung in the trading window was very reasonable, and it could even be said that it was a small profit but a quick turnover. A bottle of 50 ml culture medium, with the bacteria put in 24 hours in advance, has already turned a light cyan color, and can be identified by an independent magician to ensure the survival of the bacteria. It only sells for 1 gold coin. The magicians scanned the goods without batting an eye. Later, they even gave up cultivating penicillium themselves and only left it to their apprentices to do it one by one, while they bought it all themselves. 1 gold coin is enough for casting materials, which is so cheap for a level 14 or 5 great magician. Of course, Greet makes cornstarch culture medium here, boils a large pot at a time, and can fill 150 ml bottles, and the cost is less than 1 gold coin. He will not say this kind of thing. Come on. Do more. This month's research funding depends on you. But it must be said that the great magician is the great magician. Under the strong rebuttal that worked wonders, they really found a new path. A month later, Master Morton invited Gretel to his laboratory to observe the magic experiments. Kill pathogenic bacteria, the first experiment begins. Master Morton muttered a mantra, held a test tube of penicillium in his left hand, and kept changing gestures with his right hand. Gretel opened his eyes beside him. Okay, you really used penicillium as a casting material and developed a new magic. I just don't know how to control the healing amount of your magic. Intramuscular injection of penicillin, 800,000 to 2 million units per day, administered in 3 to 4 times, intravenous drip, 2 to 20 million units per day, administered in 2 to 4 times. During intravenous infusion, the administration rate should not exceed 500,000 units per minute to avoid central nervous system toxicity. How high is your rate? Master Morton's singing suddenly stopped. He straightened his right hand and pointed at the weak rabbit with dirty and knotted hair on the experimental table in front of him. A green light shot out from his fingertips and landed directly on the rabbit. Avida eats the big melon. Gretel muttered silently in his mind. Almost immediately, the rabbit's whole body twitched, its head and neck straightened, its limbs stiffened. Dead, dead, dead. Well, I still can't control the strength of the healing technique well. Master Morton lowered his arm and looked at Gretel awkwardly. So far, penicillium in 5 milliliters has the highest cure rate, about 30%, but the mortality rate is 70%. With such a high mortality rate, we dare not try it on patients. The mortality rate without treatment is lower than it. Gretel. Penicillin overdose, allergic reaction too serious, right? Once a large dose of penicillin is taken, the probability of allergic reactions increases exponentially. What about the mortality rate within 3 days? It will be 10% higher. Well, considering a series of adverse reactions such as penicillin encephalopathy, cerebral hemorrhage, allergic heart failure, etc. So the dosage must be controlled. If it is not made into a medicine and penicillin is used as a casting material and used directly to cast spells, it will be really difficult to control. Dosage. What about making it into medicine? Master Morton gave him a sad look. Don't ask, you'll get nothing if you ask. I spent too much time looking up information. 6,000 words tomorrow. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 299. It's so difficult to make mold into medicine. Yeah, it's so difficult. No clue at all. Yeah, it's extremely difficult. Gretel and Master Morton sat side by side in front of 17 or 8 dead rabbits, sighing one after another. Master Morton sighed because this project was too difficult, and Gretel sighed because it was too troublesome to make penicillin. Old Morton, another magician, walked in. On the badge on his chest, 3 gold stars flashed, clearly a 13th level boss. Gretel quickly stood up and saluted, "Your Excellency Novak." "Little Gretel? Why are you here?" the visitor paused. "The last time Aurora poisoned herself with chlorine gas, he was the one who came to rescue her, and he had met Gretel once." He looked Greet up and down and smiled slightly. "Oh, I remembered, the Penicillium project is yours. I asked you to come to me when you were free, why haven't you come yet?" Gretel could only smile at him. Pointing to the dead rabbit, his voice was weak. "Busy, busy. I am indeed busy. This project is not easy." Archmage Novak sighed. He turned to Old Morton and asked, "What is your spell success rate?" "I only have 10% here." "This is even worse." Greet almost covered his face as he listened to the 2 great mages exchanging spellcasting experiences. The selection of penicillium is a difficult problem. Yes, you must control the time. Current experience is that if you cast the spell 3 to 5 hours after you buy it, the mortality rate of rabbits is the lowest. The magic output must also be controlled well. Hey, I have a model curve here, do you think it will work? Gretel covered her face when she heard this. "Too big, guys. When you use penicillium to cast spells, you don't consider its active ingredient content at all." Old Morton, another person, walked in quickly from outside. When he stepped into the room and saw the dead rabbits on the floor, he immediately showed a gloating smile. "Ha ha ha, you can't do it either. By the way, have you ever tried to extract the solution from penicillium?" "I tried it," the 2 archmages replied in unison, "but it's no use at all. The efficiency of casting spells plummeted." This time, Gretel really started to cover his face. "Yes, penicillin is very unstable in aqueous solution. The decomposition will be accelerated when encountering acid or alkali. Even if nothing is added, it will decompose on its own if left in water for a long time. Not only will the efficacy of the medicine decrease, the ingredients that cause allergies will also increase. Imagine that half of a medicine solution contains allergenic ingredients. Oh yeah. Pushing a tube of liquid medicine in or throwing a magic spell over, not to mention the healing effect, the death effect is adequate." The new guy didn't notice him, and was still complaining to Old Morton. "I said, are you trying to trick me? Who is this?" Gret Nordmark, his project is simply too difficult to do, his ideas are completely different from others, and the points to pay attention to are also completely different. What about high-temperature sterilization, what about purification and breeding? These are all unheard of things. We use the methods we are used to, those spell models, magic shock, everything cannot be used. If there are any projects for him in the future, you should do it yourself and don't involve me. Cough cough, cough cough. Master Novak winked at him so hard that he almost coughed out his lungs. And Gretel stood next to the rabbit cage, showing an awkward but polite look, and also hiding a little proud smile. I just want you to stay away. Knowing that my project is not easy to do, no one will try to steal it. In fact, Gretel hasn't spent much energy on penicillin recently. Because penicillin medicine, or in other words, penicillin sodium, he is indeed about to make it. In other words, if purity is not required, he has already made it. It is nothing more than allowing penicillium to fully multiply in the culture medium, ferment, centrifuge, and filter to obtain a solution. Then, pour sodium hydroxide into it to obtain penicillin sodium, which is then crystallized. Penicillin medicine, finished. The problem now is that without pre-treatment of fermentation broth, butyl acetate extraction, back extraction, and activated carbon decolorization, the purity of the penicillin sodium obtained is very impressive. Then, the ability of penicillium to produce penicillin is also very touching. The latter is relatively easy to solve. Gretel arranged for 4 priest apprentices from the Order of the God of Nature to concentrate on cultivating penicillium and conducting targeted mutagenesis to produce the highest yield of penicillin. As for the former, Gretel knows how to do it, but he has no conditions. It's too difficult to purify. I want yellow blood salt, I want phosphate, I want flocculant, I want butyl acetate for extraction. How to prepare butyl acetate? Greet held his head and lamented. In fact, he came to the summit today with a second mission. Someone has made a rectifier that converts AC into DC, and I need him to receive it. Well, it's a good thing to have a rectifier. At least, I can make bleaching powder myself, instead of renting a thunder tower all day long, Gretel muttered as he stepped into Archmage Carlyle's laboratory. I don't know which master or school of thought made the rectifier. What kind of idea was used to make it? Brush. Diode. What is the capacity? If it's big enough, maybe the reservoir where the drinking water comes from can be equipped with a hydroelectric generator and a rectifier. Greet was thinking wildly and walked slowly inside. In the laboratory, thin arcs of electricity were shining everywhere, giving it a bit of a postmodern cyberpunk feel. He is already considered a celebrity among Archmage Carlyle. Most of the students who come and go know him, and from time to time someone greets him from a distance. Greet carefully bypassed a power grid. It was a real power grid, with blue and white arcs intertwined in the void, forming a natural network, and then far around a ball of lightning that was running happily. This laboratory is really too dangerous. Even if his body is covered with all kinds of defensive magic, he doesn't dare to run around. Follow Aurora, who leads the way, and proceed carefully. Dodging left and right, moving erratically, he finally reached the core of the laboratory. At first glance, I saw the experimental table with the largest area and the most unknown magical devices. There was a hand-operated generator placed right in the middle. This needs to be verified. Gretel walked up quickly. On both sides of the hand-operated generator, one on the left and one on the right, stood 2 magicians. The one on the left is naturally Archmage Carlyle, while the one on the right has a sad face, rough and cracked hands, and looks more like a worker than a spellcaster. He is obviously the inventor of this rectifier. "You're here." Archmage Carlyle nodded to him with a pleasant look. Then he pointed to the right. "This is Mr. Christopher Norwood, a 3rd-level Arcanist and 4th-level Mage of the Change Department. He has already made the rectifier you want. Would you like to check it out?" Greet stepped forward to shake hands with the other party. Mr. Norwood's hair is a little gray, and his outstretched hand is shaking slightly. Hello, hello, I've already made the rectifier. If you see it, if it's okay, I can get the reward, 5,000 contribution points. The last sentence was suddenly raised, the voice was sharp, and the eyes were so bright that they were about to shine. Gretel didn't even deliberately come closer, but was staggered back by the bad breath in his mouth. In an instant, as a doctor, he had a premonition and began to desperately call the police. Has a problem. There is something wrong with this person. Out of a doctor's instinct, Greet nodded repeatedly and followed the other person's words to comfort him. Okay, let me take a look at what you made first. Are you connected yet? Yes, connected. Archmage Carlyle made a gesture. Gretel leaned over to take a look. There was a small glass vessel connected to the circuit, like a pear, with a pool of sparkling mercury underneath. 2 wires extend below the mercury liquid level, and several thin graphite rods are embedded in the upper part of the glass vessel, which is perfectly inlaid with the glass. This is mercury arc rectifier. What an old thing. In the previous life, it had been out of use for more than half a century, right? Gretel suddenly turned around and looked at the gray-haired alchemist. At the same moment, Archmage Carlyle reached out and the handle of the generator began to rotate. Once, twice, until a group of afterimages appeared. It was still quiet in the glass vessel, and no sparks could be seen. Why no response? Gretel muttered quietly. However, these low words had already ignited the alchemist. Master Norwood immediately became anxious, bared his teeth and claws, and rushed forward. Impossible. What I made is good. You've used it before and said it's good. Don't even think about denying my contribution points. It's 5,000 points. His voice was high and high-pitched, and his eyelids and fingers were trembling. The alarm sound in Gretel's heart became more intense. After thinking for a moment, he suggested, perhaps the current is not strong enough? Otherwise, make a current and try it first. It's possible. Archmage Carlyle snapped his fingers, and an electric arc instantly exploded in the glass vessel. The entire circuit seemed to have been opened up in an instant. The glass vessel buzzed and trembled, and the blue light inside shone. The scene was both cool and magical. Master Norwood immediately stopped, stood blankly for a moment, and clapped his hands. Hey! Okay. This is it. This is it. Gretel made a fist. Sure enough, his impression was correct. The triggering power of the mercury arc rectifier is relatively large, and the current of the hand-cranked generator may be too small to let it work. But that doesn't matter, the worst thing is to make the generator bigger. Archmage Carlyle also looked happy. Gretel wanted to join them, but the doctor's instinct made him pull Master Norwood back repeatedly, until he retreated to the corner, and said straight away, "You're poisoned." What? The alchemist was stunned. He immediately became furious. What poisoning? I'm not poisoned. I'm telling you, don't try to deduct my money for this. Mercury is used in your rectifier. If your skin comes in contact with too much mercury, or if you inhale mercury vapor, you will be poisoned. Don't tell me you don't know, Greet sprayed back. Have you been dizzy, had headaches, and felt nauseous lately? Do you often have heart palpitations, moodiness, and are prone to insomnia at night? Do you have more ulcers and loose teeth in your mouth? Do your hands shake when you work? I hate disobedient patients the most. I hate patients who deny their illness the most. A patient should behave like a patient. It is more important to treat the disease first than to rectify it. Guess what method little Gretel used to extract penicillin? 3,000 words. Just another 3,000 words in the evening, 10,000 rewards and more updates, and it's all paid off. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. Thanks to @UNYanjai for the 233 starting coins. Thanks to @bookfriend 201812051045117442 for providing the Mercury rectifier. I'm so annoyed, my collection has started to grow at a negative rate again. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 300. Greed spat like a storm, speaking fast, with a high tone, and full of momentum. Master Norwood wanted to struggle at first, but was soon defeated by the spray and could only protest in a low voice. That's because I'm too tired. In order to catch up on this thing, I have been working day and night this month, and I have even reduced the time for meditation. Of course I will feel uncomfortable if I am overtired. Gretel raised his eyebrows. Still not convinced, right? You won't shed tears without seeing the coffin, right? Your Excellency Carlyle, he shouted, sticking his head over the patient's shoulder. Do you have a mirror here? By the way, stop the generator. Stop it first. Don't use it to generate electricity when someone is in the room. I'll tell you the reason later. He just remembered. Applying electricity to mercury vapor will produce ultraviolet rays. Excessive exposure to this thing is harmful to the skin and eyes. Solar dermatitis, keratitis, these things will come to your door. Well, although it was an unexpected blessing to get the ultraviolet lamp, there is an extra sterilizing tool in the laboratory, but now, we can't let it continue to shine. Archmage Carlyle reluctantly stopped. A small glass dish can change alternating current into direct current. The changes in current are really worth savoring as an energy-shaping magician. However, Gretel rarely spoke to him in this tone. Once he did, it would definitely be fatal, such as the last time the plague seeds were leaked. It's better to listen to him. The motor crank stopped and the blue light of the mercury arc rectifier went out, and Gretel heaved a sigh of relief. He retracted his head and faced Master Norwood. You want proof, right? Just stand still, pull your lower lip down, and let me see your gums. The alchemist was doubtful, pinched the center of his lower lip, and pulled it down. Greet glanced at it and raised his eyebrows. See, he knows. Take a mirror and look at yourself. Is there a thin blue-black line at the junction of your teeth and gums? That means mercury poisoning. It is deposited in your body and harms your body. Do you need any other evidence? In fact, there is other evidence. For example, if the skin scratch test is positive, this can be done on the spot. For example, urine mercury and blood mercury, well, there are no reagents or instruments for this, so it cannot be done now. For example, palpitations, insomnia, hysteria, trembling hands, oral ulcers, loose teeth, dizziness, headache, and nausea. These have all been proven by the patient's attitude just now. However, the above symptoms must be differentially diagnosed with other diseases. There are only thin blue-black lines on the gums, or mercury lines. If there is a clear history of mercury exposure, seeing this thin line can basically confirm the diagnosis. Master Norwood's expression has changed. Trembling, he took out a small mirror and brought it close to his face. He held his lower lip with his left hand and tried to look around. After looking at it for a long time, I let go of my hand and the small mirror fell straight down silently. Gretel caught a handful just in time. Master Norwood no longer had the mind to care about the mirror, and looked at Greet blankly, his face pale. Will I die? It shouldn't be possible, right? It's just mercury poisoning. It should be curable. It definitely can. If he had encountered a patient suffering from mercury poisoning in his previous life, he would have immediately called the internal medicine department. Even if there is no internal medicine here, he can repeat the treatment plan in internal medicine without closing his eyes. Use 5% sodium dimercaptopane sulfonate solution, intramuscular injection, once a day, 5 ml each time. 3 days is a course of treatment, and the medication can be repeated after an interval of 4 days. You can also use dimercaprol disodium or dimercaprol. But he didn't have any medicine. Sodium dimercaptopane sulfonate, disodium dimercaptobutyrate, dimercaprol, nothing. Well, why don't you wait a minute and I'll try the detoxification technique. If it doesn't work, I'll have to find a high-level priest. Gretel clearly remembered that when he had just traveled through time, he had seen Pastor Donald from the Spring Water Temple perform an antidote, even though it was of no use for allergies. Now, after he reached the 3rd level, he also learned this magical technique based on the principle of not overdoing himself with many arts. I learned it, but I didn't have much chance to use it. Gretel is not sure what effect the detoxification technique has in his hands. After all, there are too many clinical detoxification principles. Inducing vomiting. Activated carbon adsorbs intestinal toxins. Strengthen diuresis and change the pH of urine to promote the excretion of toxins. Blood purification. Injecting chelating agents to form chelates with toxic metals in the body. Toxin antagonism. With so many paths, and no clinical comparative experiments on animals, Gretel is not very confident in his magical skills. Fortunately, Master Norwood was lucky. Gretel didn't have any confidence, but his mastery of divine magic was quite solid. After the detoxification technique was released, Norwood's whole body suddenly felt light, and the headache and irritability that had been lingering for more than half a month were relieved a lot. He breathed a sigh of relief and quickly thanked. "I'm much better, thanks to you." Greet kept up his efforts and threw another antidote. After throwing away the 2 magical spells, Master Norwood opened his mouth again. The bad breath caused by mercury poisoning had faded a lot, and the thin blue-purple lines on his gums had disappeared. This detoxification technique is really effective. Greet secretly admired. The disappearance of the mercury line means that half of the toxins in the body have been removed, and the mercury poisoning has changed from moderate to at least mild. Of course, maybe the patient has fully recovered. But without testing blood mercury or urine mercury, or observing it for a period of time, Greet was not sure. Otherwise, turn him back and take a look. Before he could speak, Master Norwood had already thanked Gretel profusely. He confirmed to Archmage Carlyle that the rectifier had been accepted, and 5,000 contribution points were credited, and he was about to transfer 1,000 to Gretel on the spot. "It's not that I'm stingy. You saved my life, so I should give you these 5,000 points. It's just that in order to make this thing, I have borrowed a lot of debts. After paying off the debts and adding a dowry to my daughter, the only thing I can use is these 1,000 points." He was full of energy, and he held on to Gretel, his big hands covered with calluses, and he was so strong that he could scratch off a layer of Gretel's skin. Greet struggled in every possible way, so he had to change his tactics to persuade him. "You have mercury arc rectifiers, oh, mercury rectifiers. Do you want to make more of them? Do you want to make bigger ones and sell more of them? Do you want to know how big a rectifier is and how much current it can drive? You mean dash?" Mage Norwood trembled all over. He usually likes to think about things and make all kinds of strange things, even if these things are of no use. Most of the wealth was spent on research, so that the arcane level was raised to the 3rd level, but the mage level was still level 4. There were no resources to accumulate, and it was still impossible to upgrade. When electricity is applied to a mercury tube, the current cannot flow in the other direction. He discovered this more than 10 years ago. Unfortunately, this discovery has never been put to use, and it almost dragged him into bankruptcy. "Even if I submit my paper, I only get a basic research point and a basic contribution point. It wasn't until the latest issue of Arcane was published, with the Lord of Thunder's bounty attached, that Norwood suddenly realized. Oops. What I discovered more than 10 years ago should be used here. Of course, due to this accumulation, he received a 5,000-point reward from the Lord of Thunder. That is another story. At this moment, Greet's words really tickled his itch with every word. Seeing his eyes shining, Gretel smiled slightly and continued to seduce. I need to install several of the rectifiers you invented in my mage tower, and they may be needed in other places. If you want to repay me, why not help me make a few more? Don't worry, I will provide the materials and you will be responsible for the labor. By the way, you can also study the relationship between rectifier and current. Master Norwood has lost the ability to speak, and his head is bouncing up and down, clicking rapidly. Not far behind, Aurora rolled her eyes and murmured. It's over, the boss started kidnapping people again. That's how he was kidnapped. All kinds of wonderful ideas, endless topic selection, research conditions, and method guidance. It was originally promised that I would only work for 3 years, but now it seems that I will continue to work with the boss forever. By the way, there is also Master Lin N, who looks like he has been kidnapped halfway. But it's good. I can pet a cat every now and then, and I feel like my happiness index has increased. Carrot. Carrot. No matter what, Gretel took Master Norwood, the Mercury arc rectifier made by Master Norwood, and the hand-operated generator connected to the rectifier to the wizard tower. Without taking a breath, he began to pull Norwood up and down to check the reserved wire ducts. I'm going to install a rectifier here. I'm going to install one here. 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 By the way, help me make another fire machine. Use the fire element pool of the mage tower to provide heat and the water element pool to provide water. I will draw the blueprint for you. UV disinfection. Standard equipment for operating rooms and bacteriology laboratories. Turn it on for 30 minutes every day, and it complements the disinfectant water. I feel that the safety index has increased again. Master Norwood studied the drawings diligently. Forget about the rectifier, that generator uses steam to push the axle. Gretel only has one idea. He asked a few more questions, and Greet made a splash, took out a set of ventilator air pumps, and showed the transmission device that uses water flow to drive the axle. You discuss this with the dwarf. Master Norwood. Does this young master of the mage tower dare to be more unreliable? If it weren't for the life-saving grace, I would have left the mage tower tomorrow. Having said that, Master Norwood is still grateful to Gretel for saving his life. At dinner on the third day, when he saw Greet coming out of the laboratory listlessly and slumped into a human skin on the dining table, he took the initiative to ask. What's wrong? Is the research not going well? Penicillin extraction, still cannot be purified? Gretel sighed. There are no medicines or solvents. If he wants to purify and extract penicillin, how far does he still have to go? Can't purify it? In Master Norwood's hand, the table knife slipped and made a harsh noise when it was cut on the plate. He leaned forward, his voice concerned. Otherwise, let me try it. 3,000 words. Thousands of rewards plus more completed. The next 10,000 reward plus update is almost 10,000 starting points short. I should be able to take a rest tomorrow and only have to write 4,000 words. Cheer. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews. Asking for all kinds of things.